Welcome everyone to this webinar on Computer Security Day. I can just see the attendee count continuing to climb, so I'll just give that a few more minutes. But while we're waiting, do feel free to say hello in the chat. I can see many of you are doing that already, and I'm pretty sure covered all four corners of the country, so that's fantastic. For questions as we go through the webinar, if you want to post those in the Q&A rather than the chat, then we'll pick those up there. Also flag that this webinar is being recorded, and we'll send that out as a recording to you afterwards. Okay. Okay, well, let's get started. Welcome to this webinar. My name is Neil Collins. I'm the Managing Director at the Governance Unit within The Key, so I run GovernorHub and Key for School Governors. I'm going to be joined this evening by Sir Dan Moynihan. Dan is the CEO at Harris Federation. I think I might, Dan, saying you're one of the largest MATs in the country.
Yep, thank you, we are.
And Dan will be sharing with us a fascinating story about when the MAT was hacked and held to ransomware early on this year. But Dan, perhaps we could start by, you could maybe introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Harris Federation.
Yeah, thank you. So everyone who's here this evening, thank you so much for spending your valuable time in the evening to join us. Harris Federation is a group of 51 academies, half primary, half secondary, 3 all-throughs, couple of 6 forms, and our schools are all in and around London. We've got about just under 40,000 youngsters and around 5,000 employees.
That's quite an organisation. And then back in March, I think you were one of the first people in the organisation to find out the bad news. Can you maybe tell us where you were, how it came across? Well,
I mean, the DfE got notice from the NSA security organisation in America that hackers were going to be targeting British education around Easter and the summer. And we heard that message, and our IT people updated all the software patches, and we felt pretty confident we'd be okay. And then a week before the Easter holiday, I was out for a jog early on a Saturday morning, and an IT service manager called me to say that one of our servers had failed to back up overnight. And when he'd seen the error message and looked at it, the server had clearly been encrypted. Now, the purpose of encryption is ransomware. So it was immediately apparent to me, Neil, that we were it was an attempted robbery. And, you know, there I was in the middle of a golf course where I probably shouldn't have been running at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning, thinking, oh my God, what are we going to do? Oh, and it got worse from there.
And so what did you do? What were your first thoughts there, and what happened next?
Well, our IT people were all available on Saturday morning, and it transpired, I didn't know this, that Friday evenings are a really popular time for cyber attacks, because most organizations' IT people are not there, and you know, they're assuming that vigilance will be less good at weekends, which is probably the case. And so our IT people had turned off the rest of our network across our estate, because once this stuff is on a server, it penetrates first and then it moves laterally. And it tries to move sideways across all of your IT assets. So we turned everything off to stop further spread. And then we contacted the government's cybersecurity agency, and they have a website. And what you have to do in that situation is, you can only remove the encryption if you pay for a key from the hackers. You can't remove the encryption otherwise, or you can reinstall a backup. And you can only reinstall a backup if your backup hasn't been similarly hacked. And I was advised by our IT people that sometimes these hackers penetrate your system and then they lurk for a period of time so that their virus will be backed up whenever you back up. So we didn't know whether our backup was clean. So we contacted the National Cyber Security people, and their website listed a series of firms who could assist you with this problem. And so our head of IT contacted each of the firms on the Saturday, and none of them could actually take us on. Not a single firm could assist us because they were all completely at capacity.
So they were just too busy to take on another customer.
They were too busy. Hacking is so widespread and most people don't talk about it. It's much more widespread than we think. And these firms just did not have the capacity to work with us. So we spoke on the Sunday morning to the police who are associated with the National Cyber Centre and with staff from that centre. And basically they reassured us and said they were here to help us. And when I said, okay, what help can you give us? The answer I got was, now that you've been hacked, nothing. We give you advice in advance. So there we were. All of the firms recommended couldn't assist. And the authorities said, now we've been hacked, we were on our own.
Goodness. And presumably at this point, so it's on the Sunday.
Yeah.
And you've taken your network down to stop the malware spreading, and you know that at least one of your servers has been attacked and encrypted.
Mm.
So presumably one of the big questions is, can we actually open tomorrow on the Monday, was it?
That was the high point of stress, because like everybody who's here this evening, our schools have been closed or partially open through the lockdown. And the last thing we wanted to do, especially as we were weeks away from submitting centre assessed grades for A-level and GCSE, and our primary kids had lost lots of time, the last thing we wanted to do was shut. So we quickly created a WhatsApp group of all of our principals. And the problems we had were like all schools. Most of our schemes of work and teaching materials were stored on our system. Teachers use whiteboards. That was all locked. Our registers were gone. Safeguarding information was gone. Medical information is kept on the system. That wasn't available. CCTV was knocked out. The ability to pay for free school meals using swipe cards was gone. A number of our schools used wireless to control their front gates and front doors. We didn't know whether we'd be able to get in or even whether the doors now were open. We didn't know who we owed money to. Our finance systems were down. We didn't know who owed us money. And fortunately, we'd done a payroll run a few days before. I mean, that would have been awful had we not been able to pay people.
You literally wouldn't have been able to pay your 5,000 staff.
Everything had gone. And the problem is, if you switch it on, once this is in your system, what it does is it replicates itself and spreads. So you can't switch it on without help. So we had disaster recovery plans, and we had paper copies of key information, including medical details, students who are entitled to take medicine, etc., and names and addresses and parental details. So we had that in what we called a grab bag in each school, and effectively that allowed us to open. we'd lost fire systems in some schools, and therefore we put in place fire wardens with radios on the corridors, and we opened. But it certainly wasn't business as normal.
Your heart must have been in your mouth at that point, on the Monday morning when you're opening up. My goodness.
Yeah, nobody knew what to expect, and the students were great. We explained it to them, slightly frightened because it was something outside their understanding, but they were really well behaved. But I think what I've learned from then is, I've met people since who say, well, that could never happen to us. And once you get in this position, you look, who has been hacked? Well, I can tell you for a fact, Facebook has been hacked, Sony has been hacked, Google has been hacked, Apple's key designer of products has been hacked, Acer Computers, the largest laptop manufacturer, has been hacked, JP Morgan Chase Bank has been hacked. These are organizations that spend a multiple of what all of us here this evening together, added together, will spend on cybersecurity. And if they can be hacked, all of you can be hacked. Anyone who says it can't happen to us, deluded. The reality is, if you've got a determined cyber criminal, and ours were a top Russian outfit, a well-known Russian outfit, they can hack you. So you have to do two things. You have to work on, what can I do to prevent a hack? And secondly, what can I do about resilience, assuming that I have been hacked at some future date? Well, we had a member of our board who worked in the IT industry, and he recommended to us an Israeli cyber security agency, and we employed them.
So you've gone through the NCSC list and found nobody, and one of your, presumably a trustee then, was knew of this firm in Israel. So what was their background? What the specialist company, presumably?
They're a specialist company, like the specialist companies available in this country, and our specialist company were made up of people who'd previously been in the Israeli military, and they were cybersecurity experts, and they knew all about the Russian organization that had R-Evil, they were called, that had hacked us. In fact, interestingly, R-Evil became the focus of a row a few months later between President Clinton and President Putin. So it felt odd for us to somehow be in that mix, really.
And that, if I remember rightly, that was around a feeling that they were not just tolerated within Russia, but almost encouraged. Is that right?
Yep, absolutely. And I can see the questions coming up. We had penetration tests before. We employed a firm to undertake penetration tests regularly and send in phishing emails to see if staff would fall for them. And some staff did. Each time we do it, there are some staff that will fall for it. And we also have firms doing penetration tests to see how they could get into our network. So we've done those things. We've done those.
So did you find out then how, or subsequently, how the set of hackers from Russia had got into your systems?
On this occasion, they'd gotten in by hacking username and details from somebody's device at home. So they didn't hack our system. They stole credentials from somebody's home machine that wasn't part of our network. So someone had saved their credentials to log in. And they were very sophisticated, because what we discovered was they kind of switched their stuff on late on the Friday evening. And for 3 or 4 hours, our defenses held this thing back. And they analyzed our defenses in real time, and they wrote 6 virus scripts, 6 brand new scripts that our software couldn't see. So by 4 a.m., they'd managed to see what we had, find a way around it, and deploy new viruses that, you know, our well-known proprietary systems just couldn't see. And then
so someone, I remember staff at home had opened up I guess a phishing email, was it, and that got access to their computer.
Yeah.
From that, they could log in remotely, presumably into one of your computers within the network. But then, even then, that was protected. But then that's when the hackers really went to town, by the sound of it, and started looking for particular vulnerabilities.
Yeah, they were a very sophisticated organization, and they were able to program in real time, seeing what we had, and they were able to get around it. And I'm not going to name the products, but we have some really well-known products that we paid a lot of money for, and they proved to be utterly useless. And basically, there seems to be a league table of hackers. There are, you know, low-end hackers who buy their software on the dark web, and they'll try it on, and if they can get in, you're in trouble. And if they can't, then they go away. There are other hackers which are much more sophisticated, and they can analyze your system and then deploy expertise to get behind you. And, you know, it just depends which one of those goes for you, really. And it's a question of building your defenses. You can build layers of defenses, and I see it as, you know, the more effort you put into this, you take out the players lower down in the league, but there'll always be players above the level of defense you can install.
And do you think they targeted Harris deliberately, or was it happenstance, or what do you think?
We like the rest of the system, we got notice that this was coming to education in the UK. I mean, we are a large organization and we are high profile. It's hard to know, but our understanding afterwards, they're very cynical. They just look at your accounts, and because we're a big organization, we have an annual budget of about 280 million. They just saw that money, and they thought we'll have some of that. And they were well versed in our accounts. They were well versed in the size of the organization. And what was interesting, you know, all of these firms that you can employ, they have technical people who will get into your network and try and clean it up. But they also have negotiators. The police, interestingly, offered us a negotiator to negotiate a fee with the hackers. Our firm had a negotiator who was an ex-hostage situation negotiator, and he took on the persona of a naive female bursar, invented a name, and then went to this organization's webpage on the dark web, which they called their happy page. Wasn't anything happy about it, and then proceeded to pretend to be wet behind the ears and negotiate with these people. And the purpose of that negotiation was two things. One, to find out what they got. In other words, if we're going to pay you, what is it we're paying you for? Because at that time we didn't know what they'd got, just everything had gone. And secondly, to prolong the discussion, because what the purpose of these attacks is twofold. One, to encrypt your data so you can't function, but two, to exfiltrate it, to extract it from your organization and find whatever they think is embarrassing information they can find, and then they threaten to put that up on the dark web. So with the Apple designs for their new phones, the threat was to sell those to competitors. With Sony, it was embarrassing emails about, you know, actors, which was for them really embarrassing. For us, we didn't know what they had, but our firm went through the servers and gave us their best guess of what had been exfiltrated. There was a lot of financial stuff, which to us wasn't particularly embarrassing, but the hackers thought that was a big issue for us, knowing, you know, aren't you worried about your suppliers' details being out there? Well, not really. So
it was almost like at that point they were treating you like a £280 million business rather than an education establishment.
Yeah, and let's put it this way: there are educational things that might have cost us more stress than the kind of financial things they were worried about. So the negotiations go on, and that's what happens in this situation. We said from the beginning we weren't going to pay. We, like all of us, our money is for children. We're not paying criminals. And secondly, I didn't want Harris to be an organization that paid, because once you do that, it means it's much more likely that everybody else is going to get attacked. If we
and at this point, had the hackers actually set a ransom and they said, this is how much you want?
Yeah, so they left their calling card in the hacking software, and our response firm saw their calling card, went to their webpage, and they'd asked us for $4 million in cryptocurrency. And
$4 million.
And if we didn't pay within 10 days, it would double to $8 million. And if we didn't pay, they would expose all of the student and staff data that they had. They put that up on the internet.
So we've got to the Monday. You've opened your academies.
Yeah.
You've got the hostage negotiators from Israel and a demand for millions of dollars in ransomware.
Yeah. And we met twice a day. The team met twice a day, every day, through Easter, right through the Easter weekend, Good Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Easter Monday. And those two meetings a day continued for about 6 weeks. The guys in Israel and us in London. And it was a hell of an ordeal, is the honest answer.
And as you went through that, what were you telling parents? What were you telling staff?
On the Sunday, we put messages up on all of our websites, and we just said what had happened, and we used our text systems to send out messages to parents. And we wanted to reassure them that, as far as we knew at that point, none of their data had been lost. We had a small number of parents who were quite upset, and understandably, but the vast majority of parents were very, very supportive. And staff were apprehensive. They wanted to know, what personal data of theirs was there. So as the negotiations went on, the hackers started putting up bits of information to indicate what they had, and became willing to negotiate on the fee. They weren't interested at all in the fact that we were publicly funded schools. That mattered not at all. It was irrelevant. They just wanted cash. And had we been a hospital, it would have been the same. Like the Irish NHS was hacked, the negotiation went on. And while it was going on, the IT people were going into each server and cleaning it out. And we've got tens of thousands of individual devices, laptops with kids and staff, and every single one of those needed to be scanned individually. So we had to hire a small army of IT technicians to complement our existing people. So all of those were scanned. And I've just seen a message come up. Our school's a very small village school, so surely a large-scale criminal organization wouldn't attack. That's true. There are lots of cyber viruses knocking around out there that are not targeted at anyone. And if an organization opens them in a phishing email and you get them into your system, that alerts a hacker somewhere, and then they want money from you. So you don't have to be targeted. The stuff is just out there circulating. All someone has to do is click on it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these are essentially just sort of random casts of phishing emails. So they're as likely to land in the inbox of someone in a small school as a large one. I guess once they've hooked a big target, is a bit different. But,
we spoke to we've got a lot of people now contact us. A lot of individual schools, small trusts, and we dealt with an individual school recently who wanted help and advice, and we're really happy to give it. And they lost everything, every piece of data, all their financial data, all their pupil assessment data, everything. and they had no backup, and they're just having to rebuild from scratch.
My goodness. And how did that develop for you? So it sounded like as the weeks progressed, you were getting a better idea of what the hackers had got, what they hadn't got, and what systems had been compromised and what hadn't.
Yeah.
Did
system by system, your IT people have to go through each system and each server to make sure it's clean, and then it's switched on in a planned way, and it's covered, if you like, by a software net, because what the hackers do is they put what are called backdoors into different systems, and the backdoors are, once the system's switched on, it opens a door and communicates out to the hacker again. So you have to switch on in a controlled way and watch, and have someone watch and monitor to see what's going on.
So you're actually looking at the traffic then coming out from that device to make sure nothing untoward is coming out.
Yeah. So we brought our systems up over a period of a couple of months, one by one, and they got payroll information for a number of our schools. They got supplier information. Well, we're not worried about supplier information. They got credit card details for all of our schools, and we just cancelled all of the credit cards straight away, and we lost no money on that. They got low-level personnel stuff that wasn't a worry for us. That kind of thing, really.
And for the stuff you had lost, how did you get it back? Because you knew from day one you were never going to pay the ransom, so you weren't going to get it back from them by decrypting again. How did you get it back? How did you get back to where you were before?
Well, fortunately for us, they hadn't infected our backup. So, having a backup which isn't online is really, really important. But that doesn't guarantee you safety, because if they infect you and then they leave it for a month before it does anything, then then the virus goes into your backup. But having a backup that's not online is very important. And even if you were an organization that decided to pay the money, and there are some educational organizations in this country that have paid the money, when you get the encryption key, what we've learned is it doesn't necessarily work, or it takes you ages to get it to work, and it doesn't necessarily work with everything. And these people had got like a sophisticated service desk. They were kind of saying to us, and if you pay this fee, we'll go through your network for you, and we'll find weaknesses and help and point them out for you. It was like, pay us the money and we'll help you and be your buddies.
My goodness, it's almost like dealing with a business, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the kind of service angle and the responsiveness was better than you get with your broadband sometimes.
I mean, well, it's ironic, but it does sort of show that it's almost like an industry. We might have this picture of hackers in our mind, which has these people huddled away in somewhere, but actually, this is a sophisticated operation that's quite ruthless from what you're saying.
It's a moral free zone. Morality does not come into this at all. Our negotiator was explaining the context for our schools, the high free school meals, disadvantaged kids. That was completely irrelevant. This was entirely about gain, financial gain, with no morality. These are criminals from top to bottom, and I think it's right. It's easy for me to say if I'd built a big business and we were employing 5,000 people and our data had been hacked, then if my organization would then go bankrupt and close, I might be tempted to pay. But we weren't in that position.
So what is the situation now? Because I think actually, even was it subsequent to your case, the EFSA actually tightened up the rules here, didn't they?
Yeah, about a month after this happened to us, the EFSA said that, quite rightly, people couldn't pay ransoms from public money unless the EFSA gave permission, which it was unlikely to do. I know there are some organisations who've used private money to pay up, you know, but I think that's the right stand by the EFSA. It's the right thing to do. So we've learned the importance of backups. We've learned the importance of making sure you've got software patches and updates. And we've learned the importance of, if you can afford it, getting an external organization to do a penetration test to see if there are any obvious weaknesses. But I think you all have to assume that it's possible you will be hacked. Because if you look at the organizations that have been hacked, as I've said, they spend far more on keeping hackers out than any of us do, and they still get hacked. You need to think about resilience. And resilience is the organization's ability to anticipate attack, withstand it, and recover. So just, you know, have a senior team meeting, have a governing body meeting and say, right, we've been hacked. What do we need to have to stay open? So where is your grab bag? Where are your medical details, names and addresses, registers? What systems would be taken out? How would you make this work? And have that in your disaster recovery plan.
And you talked about this grab bag. That's a really interesting concept. Was this literally a bag? Was it printed out?
Yeah,
bits of paper.
Safe of our office and of our school offices. So we've got that as part of our disaster recovery plan. So it's instantly available. And someone's just popped up saying they'd recommend multi-factor authentication, and I agree. We've moved over to multi-factor authentication. So everyone in secondary and all staff can only log in if they put in their username and password. And then what happens, you get an alert to your phone. And then what you have to do is approve it on your phone before it will let you in. I mean, we still,
particularly, I guess in this case, that member of staff that clicked on the phishing email, they got their credentials, but those wouldn't have worked in this case because they would have also had to have somehow mimicked that mobile phone connection.
Well, we've now got multi-factor authentication, so that would have stopped that way of hacking, but there are 100 other ways they can get in. You know, that's not the only way.
And as you went through this process, how did you involve your trustees and governors? I mean, one trustee obviously gave you a big pointer towards the Israeli firm, but more widely, how were they involved in this?
We formed a small governance group for this from our governing body, and we reported to them regularly on progress and what was happening. And just having an IT expert there, I mean, we would have been lost. He gave us the name of the firm, Signia, they're called, in Israel, and I checked with cyber specialists in this country, and they verified Signia were a really good organization. And the whole thing cost us £750,000.
So outside of any ransom, this was just your costs in terms of dealing with this?
Yeah.
£750,000.
So we had everything to pay for, from extra boots on the ground to scan the devices. We had Signia's costs to pay for, overtime for our IT people who worked every weekend for 8 weeks, most of them. And we had partial cyber insurance, and it covered probably 500k of that. So in the end, it was a disaster, but not you know, as bad as it could have been. And since then, we've taken out full cyber cover.
And that full cyber cover that you've now taken, does that come with requirements, i.e. particular standards that you have to comply with?
It does, yeah, it does, but they're not hugely onerous.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if today you weren't on that side of the camera, instead you were sitting in the audience as a governor or as a trustee, what would your advice be to those people to say, as a governor or trustee, these are the things that you really should be doing in your school or academy?
Yeah, I'm driven mad with people who tell me that this couldn't happen to them. And if you have anyone in your school who says to you, well, it couldn't happen here, they're wrong. I think the key thing to do is focus on resilience. Assume it has happened, war game that, and imagine what would you need? How could you stay open? What plans do you need? What comms do you need? You know, so that's one stream of work, and then the second stream of work is, you know, get someone, whatever you can afford, to penetration test your network, and you know, do a phishing email test as well. And as much
so
as
this is an external organisation, external to the school I'm at.
As much as you tell people, you know, don't open these emails, you know, you get in emails and the address is almost identical to the address of a Pucker user. There might be one letter that's different, and you'll still get people who'll type in their credentials to that. But the question is, you know, if you keep on raising the awareness of that, you want to reduce the number of people who'll do that to as low as possible.
Wow. And it's fascinating actually, because with the key for school governors, you know, people come in and search for the key questions of, you know, what they're looking for today. And so I had a look for this month to see where cyber security featured in terms of the searches that governors are doing. Guess where it ranked?
Pass.
It made just over the 200th most searched. So it was so far down the priority list for governors.
Yeah.
I mean, it's astonishing because it's hard to conceive, but the way you've described this, I think it absolutely petrifies any trustee, governor, or head teacher that hears this message.
But it's only,
and yet,
it's going to become a bigger problem. This isn't going away. This is big business, and it's going to become a bigger problem. And soon we'll find artificial intelligence and AI bots will be doing this without anyone directing them. They'll be out there in cyberspace. You know, that's coming your way. And, you know, it was bizarre because we ended up with the hackers phoning, looking for me and senior staff to talk to persuade to pay up. So it's real people as well. It was bizarre.
And they'd got the contact details, presumably from the systems, and could then
and like key people websites that were phoning up wanting to speak. And our Israeli friends advised us that this was likely to happen, and there may be threats. I didn't get any threats, but I didn't take any calls either. Any calls with no user ID did not get answered.
And you sound so calm about it now. It must have been quite terrifying at the time. It
was horrendous. Yeah, it was horrendous.
I mean, in your professional career, does this compare with other sort of dilemmas you've had, or is this right up there?
Oh, it's actually something that's more stressful than Ofsted.
I think that brings it home to anyone in education. They know how stressful that is. Well, it's fascinating. Maybe we can now go to some of the questions. We had a few in before the webinar, and also we've had actually loads come in on the chat and the Q&A. One of the questions came in is about your IT team. It's that you've said about how you brought in experts as well, but within your MAT, do you have IT expertise in each school? Is it centralized?
We've got a central team.
Right. Yeah. And presumably reasonably capable as a team because you've got a large organization.
They're capable people, but the reality is you can prepare for this, but once it happens, it's a thing. And we were panicked to start with. We just didn't know what to do, and we had to create really a strategy when we found out that there was no support really available. There's no one going to come and hold your hand and say, here's what you do. You are actually on your own with this stuff.
That's astonishing. And then also we had quite a few questions about whether these were just sort of local systems on your network, or were these cloud-based systems that were hacked? Was it a combination? Was it one or the other?
They didn't get into the cloud. They got into local server systems, but they're all joined together in our network.
Right.
Stuff that was on Microsoft 365 and SharePoint was secure. They just couldn't get into that.
You're right. Yes, because I guess then they would have had to have actually hacked the Microsoft systems to have got into those.
I suppose what it's made us think about is, where we've got older files, you tend to accumulate stuff, older salary runs and details from the past. We've now got quite a rigorous policy of getting rid of older information that just isn't required.
Right.
Because quite a lot of that went up. We could have saved ourselves embarrassment if we'd pruned stuff as we went along.
Yes, that's interesting, isn't it? And then that is part of the sort of GDPR guidelines, isn't it, about good information security and how you protect the stuff you have, but also you don't keep hold of things which you just don't need anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. And then if you had your time again, would there have been anything during the actual hack that you would have done differently?
I think we were right to keep our schools open, even though we weren't functioning properly. We were right to employ a specialist firm to assist us. I can't really think of anything we'd have done differently. I mean, it was just awful. Even in terms of security, we've implemented all of the things our friends in Israel have told us to do to harden our network using the technical term. We can still be hacked. That's the problem.
So it really comes back to that: have a recovery process agreed and tested.
Yeah.
And I guess also there, looking at that as something you look at regularly. As governors, we sort of know, right, let's review this policy on an annual basis. Which one to twice annually. But this is something, I guess you're almost dealing with this arms race of capabilities. So are we in a good position?
Yeah. And you then got to satisfy the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office, who want to know the details of any data breach, and we await their report. So that's another step to this. So
at what point did the ICO get involved then? Presumably afterwards.
We during the hack, we as soon as we were aware of the hack and we knew what kind of data had been exfiltrated, you got a responsibility to tell the ICO, and then the ICO start sending requests for information, and we had maybe 10 letters, each letter with pages of questions. And it wasn't helpful really during the process to have specialist people trying to answer all of this technical stuff when they needed to be focused on rebuilding. But I understand the ICO's got a job to do, and they'll produce a report on all of this at some point in the future. But that's kind of a tough one.
And how long did it take you from that phone call at 8 a.m. on the golf course through to being back to normal as a trust? How long did it take?
It took us about 2.5 months.
Wow.
Yeah, it took us about 2.5 months. And if they'd attacked us 48 hours before the teacher assessed grades were due to be sent in, we would have been really in trouble.
And so how did you deal with that? How did you do the grades?
We prioritized getting that system back.
Right.
So that was fine, but that was clearly a big worry. But it was they attacked sufficiently ahead of the deadline that we had time to try and sort that out.
Yeah, probably not key in their calendar as it is in ours in terms of when those things have to go in.
That was being Russian, I suppose. Had they been British?
and were the things you didn't get back?
The only system, oddly, that they completely wrecked was our CCTV systems. All of the CCTV servers had to be rebuilt. They were effectively destroyed. I don't know. I'm not technical enough to know why that was, but CCTV was wrecked, and the servers had to be rebuilt. But everything else we were able to recover.
Goodness me, that's it's a fascinating story, but also quite harrowing. And I think there's some of the things that you've actually been through and lived through that feels almost like a Netflix special. I think it's really brought it home, certainly to me as a governor, but I think also to a lot of people on this call, to say take it really seriously.
It's so cynical. I mean, we've taken out cyber cover, and I think we're covered for about 2 million, and we're with Zurich for this. And I can't remember the fee offhand, but it's a lot of money. But what these hackers do is they search for your cyber policy on your network to see how much you're covered for. That's standard practice.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so they're looking for that insurance cover, and that's what I think they'll get. And I mean, there are moves, I think, we're within government to potentially make it illegal to pay ransoms like this. And you've been very clear. You took a very firm line on this from the day one. You weren't going to pay.
Right.
But what's your view of that? If that sort of a law would prevent any business paying?
I think certainly for the public sector, it's a good rule to have because it's taxpayers' money. And I'd like to say it should apply for the private sector. But if I was an employer and people's livelihoods depended on me, and my business is going to collapse and be destroyed if I don't pay up, I'm not saying you should pay, but I think that's a huge moral dilemma for people. And I can see if it was illegal, you might have some employers secretly trying to break the law in order to protect their livelihood that they built up. It's really difficult. I'm not saying the answer is not to ban it. I'm just saying I can see in the private sector how really problematic that is.
Yeah, I think it is. But, I think on behalf of schools and academies out there, thank you for not paying, because I think you're absolutely right. Had you paid up, it would have said, yes, here's a ripe sector to attack. And I think these will be coming, absolutely, as you said, but hopefully you've stemmed the tide for some time anyway. Well, Sedan, that's absolutely fascinating. Thank you ever so much for sharing. There's a few things that I'll just go through here in terms of pointing our governors and trustees at other resources that they can use. But are there any sort of final words you'd like to share with the governors and trustees on this webinar tonight?
For me, if it happens to you, you will survive it. That's the key thing, and it can happen to anyone. Don't blame yourself, but just focus on resilience. Imagine it's happened and what you could do. If you want to hear more, BBC Radio File on 4 made a podcast about our experience, and if you go to BBC Sounds and go to File on 4 and search for Held to Ransom, there's a 30-minute podcast with Russian voices, and someone panting along, being me in the golf course, out of breath. That's quite entertaining.
I can attest to that. I'm not sure entertaining is the word I would use. It's absolutely petrifying. I thought it's a really good listen. I can absolutely recommend that. Well, excellent. Thank you, Sedan. It's been great listening to you. Let me just pull a few things together now about what does this mean for governors. I think, as Sedan touched on there are so many things which are linked to your computer network: CCTV access to buildings, access to the site. Phones these days will often go over the network. Your fire alarm systems linked to your network. So it's not just necessarily things you are conscious of as a governor in terms of work, whiteboards, computers. There's so many other things as well. As governors, you are responsible for your school's cyber security. So there is a very clear responsibility that sits with the board. I think as we've heard very eloquently there, it's important to understand that it can happen, and you should plan as if it will happen. What will you do to recover? And I think there's some excellent guidance in terms of what things you can do, and it's a really good way to spend time and effort as a board and as a senior leadership team in terms of getting this right. I think making sure that cybersecurity is part of your school's objectives and priorities. I think this is really important in a lot of the way you manage risk. We're a lot of us familiar with managing risk within our schools, and it's a way, particularly for governing boards, to look at problems. But making sure cybersecurity is taken as part of that, perhaps even the biggest risk we all carry these days. Helping your leaders in compliance there, looking at the resources they need, and also then asking the right questions at your next board meeting. Hopefully to help you with that, well, some of the things we'll do, so we'll send you a recording of this webinar. We'll also send you a link to a cybersecurity quiz, so you can test yourself to see how your school fares in terms of cybersecurity. We'll also point you at a number of free resources. So Dan referred to a number there from the DFE and the National Cybersecurity Centre. They've actually got a really good toolkit for boards which can help you reduce the exposure your schools have got to these risks. By all means, feel free to share that with colleagues, with other schools. But thanks ever so much for your time tonight. I hope you found this useful and interesting. And we hope to see you on one of these webinars again soon. Thanks ever so much.